Amazon RDS Managed Databases. In this particular section, we are going to look at overview of RDS and supported database engines. We cover creating and managing RDS instances, and then we're going to jump into a hands-on exercise for connecting an RDS database to an application. And finally, we'll do our project 4, which is build a blog application using EC2, RDS using MySQL, and S3 for image storage. So let's get started. First, let's go over the overview of RDS and supported database engines. Amazon RDS or Relational Database Service is a fully managed database service that makes it easy to set up, operate, and scale relational databases in the cloud. RDS automates time-consuming tasks such as hardware provisioning, database setup, patching, and backups, allowing you to focus on your application. Some of the key features of Amazon RDS include Managed Service. AWS manages routine tasks such as backups, software patching, monitoring, and scaling. Automated backups. RDS allows you to enable automatic backups as well as create manual snapshots of your database. Multi-AZ deployments. RDS supports automatic failover to a standby instance in a different availability zone, improving database availability. Read replicas. RDS allows you to create read replicas for performance and scalability. Some of the supporting database engines include Amazon Aurora, MySQL and PostgreSQL compatible, offers high performance and availability than standard MySQL PostgreSQL with up to 5 times better throughput. We have MySQL, one of the most popular open source relational database. We have PostgreSQL, an advanced open source relational database system known for its extensibility and SQL compliance. MariaDB, a popular open source database created by the developers of MySQL. Oracle, enterprise level database system with support for various versions and editions. Microsoft SQL Server, Microsoft's relational database widely used in enterprise settings. Let's look at creating and managing RDS instances. The steps for that is first you have to launch an RDS instance. For that, go to the RDS dashboard in the AWS Management Console and search for RDS and navigate to the dashboard. We're going to run through this in the hands-on, but I'm going to put the steps down here. Next, click Create Database. This begins the process of launching an RDS instance. Next, select the database engine. Choose the database engine that best fits your application needs. We will be using MySQL, so that's what we will be selecting. Next, choose a database template. Choose the appropriate use case for your database. For production, automatically includes features like multi-AZ and backups. For dev and test, simplified for non-production environments like single AZ. Specify database settings. In this case, we'll be specifying DB instance identifier, a unique name for your RDS instance. We'll give a master username, the admin user that will have full control of the database, and we'll give the master password. And for that, make sure you choose a strong password. Configure instance size. Choose the appropriate instance type based on your needs. For small scale applications, the db.t2.micro instance type is a good starting point and it's eligible for free tiers, so we're going to try that. And then storage configuration. Set the storage size for your database. For most cases, 20 GB general purpose SSD is enough for small applications. You can enable storage auto scaling if you expect future growth. And then enable multi-AZ deployment, which is optional. For production environments, you may want to enable multi-AZ for automatic failover to a secondary availability zone. This ensures higher availability in the case of failures. We are not going to do that in our sample because we're just going to create something for learning purposes. So single AZ works for us. Set up connectivity. We'll have to set up the virtual private cloud VPC. Select the VPC where the RDS instance will be deployed. Next is subnet group, which automatically is selected based on the VPC configuration. And then public access. If you want your database to be accessible from the internet, select yes. However, for security reasons, databases are often placed in private subnets without public access. Next, security group. choose an existing security group or create a new one that allows traffic to the default MySQL port, since we're using MySQL 3306. Backup settings. Enable automatic backups specifying the retention period, example around 7 days. Enable enhanced monitoring for deeper insights into instance performance metrics. And finally, launch the instance. Review your configuration and click create database in this particular step. Now, step 2, managing your RDS instance. First thing that is important is monitoring and metrics. In the RDS dashboard, you can monitor your instance's health, CPU usage, memory, IOPS, and more. And you can also use CloudWatch to set alarms and get notified if thresholds are exceeded. And we're going to learn about CloudWatch later in one of the videos. Backup and restore. RDS automatically backs up your database daily. You can also create manual database snapshots at any time. Restore a database to any point within your retention period by selecting restore to point in time. Now, scaling. RDS allows you to scale vertically by changing the instance class, example from db.t2.micro to db.m5.large, which adds more CPU and memory. You can also scale your storage capacity without downtime if you enable storage auto scaling. Security. RDS integrates with IAM to control which AWS users and services have access to the database. For enhanced security, use SSL TLS encryption to encrypt data in the transit. So these are the two steps that we'll be doing in our hands-on. So let's jump into the hands-on exercise where we will be connecting an RDS database to an application. In this hands-on section, we will connect, as I mentioned, RDS database or MySQL instance to a web application running on EC2 instance. So there'll be a bunch of steps. The first step will be launch a MySQL RDS instance. We'll follow all the steps that we just went over. Step 2 is launch an EC2 instance from the application. And step 3 is install MySQL client on the EC2 instance. And finally, create a simple web application to access this database. We'll do that. We'll use PHP for our code to connect to it and get the database data. So let's jump into it. Step 1, launch a MySQL RDS instance. So let's go to our management console and here let's search for RDS. Once you're in the RDS dashboard, scroll down and you can create a database from right here. Inside here, I'm going to say standard create. I'll select MySQL. I will leave everything else as it is here. For templates, there is production, which will use multiple AZs, or you can use dev test. Or for this particular example, I'm going to just say free tier because I can play around with without paying anything. Next, availability and durability. So if I select the dev test, you can actually select these different things. But since I am using free tier, and it doesn't matter because it's about how many deployment, what deployment you need. You want to have multiple instances of your database in different zones, then you probably select this. But for us, we'll just go with this. I am going to give a name to this. I am going to say AWS Training DB. Credentials, I'll leave it as master username is admin. Remember this for future use. And then at the bottom, we have password, which I'm going to also use as admin. It says very weak, so I will give a strong password. Okay, that kind of works. Next, confirm. So next step is instance configuration. For this, I'm going to go look at the options, and if you see, I have these two options that are available under the free tier, so I'm going to leave it as it is. Next, let's look at storage, and it's saying general purpose SSD 20. That looks good. Next thing, connectivity. Don't connect to an EC2 compute or connect to an EC2 compute resource. I'm going to leave it to default. Don't connect to an EC2 instance. Default VPC, that's fine. After the database is created, you can't change, that's fine. And subnet group, I'll leave it to default. Public access, I want to access this, so I'll probably select yes for now, because however, for security reasons, databases are often placed in private subnets without public access. So I'm going to select it as yes for now because we're going to directly access it. And for VPC security group, it's saying choose existing, but we have the default one, so I'm going to just leave that as the option. Availability zone, no preference. We have different options here. I can always select 1A, yeah, just so that I know which one I'm connecting to. I'm going to leave the RDX proxy. I don't need that, so I'm going to leave everything else. There is also an enable enhanced monitoring, which I don't need. Database instance, this is what it will cost me. Storage and total around this much per month, that's what they're estimating. And I am going to go ahead and jump into create database. It's going to give me some suggested add-ons for AWS. These are database. I am going to say nope, I don't need that anymore. So since I'm still working on it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to step 2 because that's all that you need to do to create a database. And our step 2 says launch an EC2 instance for the application. So I'm going to go, you have idea of how to create an EC2 instance. So I'm going to directly jump into EC2. I'll have to connect it through SSH. So I have deleted pretty much everything from before. So I'll have to do it from scratch. So I'm going to say launch instance, fastest way. My DB tester, and I'll select this. I'll keep the free tier one. Everything looks fine. T2 micro key pair. I'll have to create a new one. So I'll say create new key pair. I'm going to call it my DB testing key and create the key pair. I'll make sure I have it on my desktop. Next, let's see, create security group, allow SSH traffic. I also need traffic from outbound traffic on port 3306 for MySQL. So I'm going to go and set it up after this. Configuration, everything else looks fine, and I'll say launch instance. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to go back to my instance, and as I mentioned, inside my security group that I just created, which is this one, I am going to edit the outbound rules. I'm going to add a rule here, and for this one I need the 3306, which is MySQL port. So I'm going to open this. It will give me the 3306 port. Save, and oh yeah, I also have to enter this and say save rules. Next, I need to SSH into it, into this particular EC2 instance. So let's go to the, so let's jump into the instances, and here is my instance running. So to connect to this, I can click on this here and then open my terminal, increase the size, desktop, ls, and I have my key already over there. So the first step is this. Okay, next step is SSH into it. It will ask me to add the fingerprint, yes, and I am inside the EC2 instance. Let's go to the next step. Install MySQL client on EC2 instance. So that's our next step. So in this particular case, first let's go to the SSH that we opened. So I'm going to say sudo yum install MySQL community client. Say yes, 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 and it will install the MySQL client here. So next step is to connect to the RDS MySQL instance using the MySQL command. So just clear this out. So I'll say MySQL -h the RDS endpoint. So we'll have to go and get that RDS endpoint here. So we'll open our RDS. Let's see if it is available. And we have it's available, so it's completed. Let's go here, and the endpoint is right here. So I'm going to copy this endpoint, paste it here. Next, I need -u and our master username, which is admin-p. It will ask me for the password, and I'll enter the password now. So it connects directly, and I have my MySQL prompt. So that kind of completes our installing MySQL client on EC2 instance. Next, we'll look at how to create a simple web application to access the database. I'll go back to my dashboard here, and here I am gonna say EC2, and I think I already have the connection. So let me exit this, and here the first step will probably to install the necessary components. Example, we'll probably have to create a PHP Apache Node.js on the EC2 instance. So what we'll do is sudo yum install Apache. We have PHP MySQL ND, and say yes to all the prompts. And it's complete. So that's good. Next step is I'll start my Apache server, systemctl, start httpd, and I'll enable it. Sudo systemctl enable httpd. So that will make sure that it's there. Now next thing, we have to create a PHP file that connects to the MySQL RDS instance. So what I'm going to do is I am going to create an index.php file and then upload it to the HTML folder. So I'm going to say cd. I will probably have to go to that particular folder. So slash variables slash w slash html here, and here I will, and in this particular folder I will create the file. I'll call it index.php, and my index.php is created. I am going to write this file. It's not letting me write because I think I don't have access. So I'm going to go back and say chmod. So that is not permitted. It says chmod dot 777 dot, and that will take care of it. Next, I will go ahead and write this file, make sure I can write it. So I'm going to try to see that's written. Perfect. So here for the PHP, I will write some PHP as insert, okay, question mark PHP, and I'll first give the server name variable, which is my the RDS endpoint. So I'm going to go to my RDS again, get that endpoint, databases, click on this. This is the endpoint. I copied it, I'll paste it here. Perfect. Next thing, I need my username. This username is admin. Next, I need my password, and password is AWS training 1982. Next thing that I need is the database name. I think we named it AWS training database, if I'm not wrong. Yes, it is. Next, I need to create a connection to this particular MySQL. So I'm going to create a connection variable, and the code is MySQL I, if I'm not wrong, and I have to pass server name, I have to pass username, I have to pass the password, and I have to pass the database name. So that will create a connection to my MySQL server. Now let's check the connection. If $connection has a connect error, then in this case I will say die. I'll kill the connection, say die, connection failed. Probably want to give the description of it, dollar connection connect error. Okay, that's all good. Okay, so that's the first case. Now if everything was successful, I am going to say echo connected successfully. Now if this thing, if there's a connection error, it will just stop everything here and not go to this code here. So just to let you know. Okay, so that takes care of it. I'm going to save it, and that file is saved. Now what we have to do is this file is saved as index.php. I have to access it via the browser using the public IP address of this EC2 instance. So I'm going to go ahead and go to EC2. I have one instance is running. Click on that. This is the public IP address. I'll open this address. Don't have HTTPS. Open this, and here I am going to say index.php. Enter, and it is not working. So something's wrong with our script. Let's look here. vi index.php database name. Let's check the database name. RDS databases. Click on the database. I feel, oh yep, we have not given a database name. So let's go back here, update this to say no database name. See, that's it. Let's come back, refresh, and connect it successfully. So there we go. We were able to go through the entire steps of launching a MySQL RDS instance, launching an EC2 instance for the application, install MySQL client on EC2 instance, and create a simple web application to access the database. So that kind of covers our hands-on. So if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. If you were not able to follow along or any issues you faced, let me know in the comments and I'll get back to you. Project 4. Build a blog application using EC2, RDS MySQL, and S3 for image storage. In this project, we'll build a simple blog application that stores blog posts in an RDS MySQL database, uses S3 for image storage, and runs the application on an EC2 instance. So it's a little bit more complicated than what we did on hands-on. So step 1 will be set up RDS MySQL for blog post storage. Then we'll set up an S3 bucket for image storage. Then we're going to launch an EC2 instance and deploy the application. And finally, we'll create the blog application. So let's jump into it and create project 4. Step 1, set up RDS MySQL for blog post storage. So in this case, we're going to create a MySQL RDS instance as we've done in the previous section, but we'll start from scratch and we'll create a database for our blog post. We'll log into the MySQL RDS instance and create a table to store blog post data. So let's start with RDS. I'm going to click on RDS, go to databases, and I'm going to create a database here. This is standard create. I'll use MySQL. I will say MySQL community edition, and in here this is good. I'll again use the free tier one. I am going to setting database instant identifier, that's fine. Admin, self-managed, password I will give the same thing again, AWS training 123, AWS training 123. Perfect. So that's good. Show, let's see anything else that we need to change here. Everything looks good. Use default VPC, have this set up. Availability based zone, no preference. Oh, actually I'll say US1 East. Everything else looks perfect, and I'll say create database. So this will start my database process. While it's still creating this database, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and create the S3 bucket. So I'm going to go inside S3 and create a new bucket, general purpose, and this bucket I will call it, let's say, my blog images BKT. So this is where all the images from the blog will be saved. Object ownership ACL disabled. Block public access settings for this bucket, I'll enable it so I can add data from my application. Bucket versioning disable. Tags, server-side encryption, bucket key, and let's look at advanced settings if you have anything in here. Object lock, nope. So create bucket. So let's go ahead and create our EC2. I'm going to go to EC2, and here I'm going to launch a new instance. I'm going to call it my blog server AWS. I will use the basic ones, everything basic. Select key pair. I'm going to use the MyDB testing key which I've created in the hands-on video. I'm not going to create a new key, but you can create if you want to. And everything else looks fine. And I'm going to say, actually, I'll say allow HTTPS traffic, not HTTPS, allow HTTP traffic from the internet. It's good, and launch instance. Now this is successfully launched. Now let's go ahead and connect to this via SSH. So I'm going to go here. I am going to select the instance and connect to it using this. I'm going to open a terminal. That's cd desktop because that's where my key is. Make sure, I think I had already done that, so I don't have to do that, but I can directly connect to SSH. Yes, and it's connected, clear. So I am in my EC2 instance. Now go ahead and let's go ahead and install whatever we need, like sudo yum install httpd php dash mysql nd dash y, yes to everything. And it's going to install those packages. Perfect, and that's done. Let's start the server. Sudo systemctl start httpd, and next enable it. Sudo systemctl enable httpd. That's done. Let's clear it out. So until now we have pretty much set up this blog post storage. We created the S3, and next this is the S3 bucket. We created the database. We launched an EC2 instance and deployed the application. I mean, didn't deploy the application. We'll deploy the application, and then finally we'll start with creating the blog application. So let's go ahead. But before going here, let's check the status of our database. Can go to RDS back again, click on the databases, and it's available. So the database is available. One of the things that we did before was making sure that the security group that is created, let's go inside here and then look at the rules, and we have to go to outbound rules, edit, and in here add a rule that was saying that we need to make sure that traffic to MySQL, let's go ahead and say MySQL 3306 is enabled. Save rules. Next step, let's go ahead and create that PHP code for the blog creation. I'm going to go ahead in my S2, the EC2 instance, which we have SSH to, and go to cd slash variable slash www slash html. Inside here I'm going to create that, so let's see if I can create, but before that sudo chmod 777 dot, so I have full access, and I'll say vi index, or I can call it something else. I'll call it blog dot php, something like that. And here let's start inserting stuff. So PHP, so I'm gonna say this, closing PHP tags, and in here I will use the AWS SDK for PHP, which is require vendor slash auto upload, auto load, actually not auto upload, auto load dot php, and then I want to use AWS slash s3 slash s3 client, so I'm gonna add that. And to access that, let's create a variable s3 equal to new s3 client. That's how you do this, and inside here I will give options like version and region that I'm using. So I am going to say version is equal to, let's see if I have all the version is, it's always a good practice to move it in different lines so it's cleaner. So I have the version that I'm going to use is the latest version, so you can just say latest. And then another thing that I mentioned was about the region. So region that I want to deploy this, or where this application is deployed, is US-East-1. So specify that. Now next we need to give that server names. So server name equal to whatever the server name RDS endpoint is. Next I'll give the username, which we know is admin, so I can just specify now, and we know the password that we're using, that is AWS training 123, and then finally the database name, I think it's nothing, so I will leave it empty. Next time probably I'll use a blog or something. Let's see if I can go and edit it. So I can go to RDS, and inside the database have this database here. Let's get the endpoint, and I can add that here, and then we'll create a connection to that MySQL. So that is dollar connection equal to new MySQL I, and we pass dollar server name, dollar username, dollar password, and dollar db name. That's all we need to do to create the connection. And once the connection is started here, I can check if dollar underscore server is request underscore method. So if there was a request to post, a post method was sent from the, let's say, web server or web, the client user has sent that. So in that case I am going to get that request. So the user needs to send me a title, and that I can fetch by saying this is the title. Next I need them to send, let's say, some content of the blog. Content equal to dollar underscore post, that will also be in the post data content. Next I want to get that image, so I'm going to say dollar file, the file to upload, the image to upload. So that I will say equal to dollar underscore, and it comes with files parameter, and inside that image, there will be a temporary name. That's how the file will be fetched. And then I'll need a key, which is base name. So we'll set the name as dollar underscore files, whatever the image is, and its name that is coming from there. Wrong quotes. name that we get, that's what we'll set as the key for it. Next, bucket, where I want to upload this. The bucket is, let's go to S3 and search for buckets. Okay, there's the bucket. That's the name of my bucket, which I'll specify here. So that's the bucket that I want to save it to. Now I'll try and put it in there. So first thing to have to do is write a try catch here if there is error or something. So that's why I'm doing a try, and I'm saying result of this operation, which is dollar. I think we created this s3 parameter on the top here, right here, s3, where we created to the client. So I am going to go there to that s3. I'm going to say put an object, put object, and that object is, put in bracket, it needs a bucket, it needs a bucket parameter, and that we already created, which was under the name dollar bucket. Next, it needs a key, that's why we created that key parameter, and we'll pass dollar key to it. Next, it needs the source file, and that is coming from the dollar file that we created above here. And next, finally, it needs the ACL, which in this case is public read. So this image could be publicly read. That's the property that I'm setting to this. And then I have not closed it. Let's make sure I go all the way to the end, public read, and then I'll close this square bracket and the angular bracket, and the curly bracket, not curly but the actual bracket, and then I'll set the image URL equal to dollar result. So once it's uploaded, it's going to give me back that inside result, which will have the key object URL. So that's how you get that. But what if there is an error? So I'm going to catch this exception $e, because I want to print it out, and I will echo this back to whoever made this request, call it upload error, and $e to get message. So whatever that error was, we are trying to print that out here, and that's what's happening here. Now I also need to insert this into, once we have that image uploaded, we want to make a SQL query. So I'm going to say SQL equal to insert into, the name of the table is, we didn't create it yet, but I'll call it posts. It needs title, content, and image URL. These are the three things that we probably saw that we might need, and the values of these will coming from above, which is, since it's a string, I'll say dollar title. Next is dollar, again this is also a string, so I'm going to say content, comma, the third part is image URL, which is what we just fetched, which is also a string, dollar image, what was it, image URL, the image URL. So I have that. I'll close my bracket, I'll close my this bracket here, and semicolon. Perfect. So this is my this will create my SQL query. Now let's try it. If dollar connection, is that the name that I used, dollar $CONN, so dollar $CONN query, so I'm asking to that query that can to that connection, can you run this SQL query? If you can run this SQL query, is it true, then, which means it was successful, and I can say echo new post created successfully. But if it didn't go through, if it didn't go through, yes, I was right over there, I think, else I'll say echo error dot dollar, in this case SQL, whatever that query that I wrote, I want to display it before I tell what error it is. So sometimes it's good to see the SQL query so you know what the problem is. Connection dash error, this will give me the actual error, and that it will tell you this SQL query had this error. So that's what this will show you. So this is all that I need to do here. This is an example of how you can insert into it. As we are not going to do the entire blog application, but just to get an idea, we'll create this. Let's create also a, let's say, HTML file. I'll call it home.html. Inside this, we'll just make a simple form. I am going to say form, and inside this form there is an action equal to what was my PHP file that I just made? Let me just WQ. It was blog.php. So let's say this will be sent to blog.php, and inside here we'll do a method of, so now we are doing the UI code for what the user will see. Post method enc type encryption type equal to, in this particular it's a multi-part form, so I'll say multi-part slash form data. That's what we will send in this particular case. Next we need to provide the get the title from the user, and that is a normal input type equal to text, and name equal to, what was the name that I used? I think title. So I'll use that same name here, so when it sends the form I don't have to do much, and I'm not gonna do styling and stuff. If you are free to do whatever you want, but I'm just gonna create a basic form here. Text area name equal to, I'll say content, because that's what we are sending, and close that text area, and I'll do the next line here. It will be really bad looking form, but it will work. That's what we want. Input type equal to, so it's a file upload, so I'm going to say file name equal to, also I'm not going to do any validation. I'll hope like the user will enter everything in this case, but you're free to add your validation. Finally, input type, in this particular case I'm going to use the submit button by saying submit value equal to create post. That's pretty much, let's close this and let's close the form. So this looks like a very simple form. It's created, that's done. Now next thing is, we have to still create the table. So we have the database, RDS database created here, but to add tables to it or add a database into it, if you see inside my configuration, I have database name is nothing. So I am going to go into my here and do a MySQL connect to that particular, let's clear it first, we don't need all these things. I am going to go to the root, clear again, and now I will connect to the MySQL server. So I'll say MySQL minus h, if we did this in the previous section, so we are going to do the same thing, get the RDS databases address or endpoint, which is in the first set here, endpoint, and then I'll say user is admin, needs a password. Oh, I think I forgot to set up the MySQL here, so I'm going to run that. Sudo, so sudo yum install -y. It says already installed. I've installed it before, but if you have not, just give this command and it should work. And then I'll say MySQL. I'll give that command, which was, let's see, MySQL -h database admin p, and says enter the password, which is AWS training 123, and I am inside my MySQL prompt. Once I'm here, I can say create database. Let's give it a name, blog, and then I'll say use blog. So now I've changed the database to this blog, and I'm going to say create table, call the name table post, and inside this I'll give different parameters, like for example ID integer, which is auto increment primary key, make it the primary key. Next I'll create the title, which is varchar 255 not null. Next I will create the content, which is text not null. So I'm pretty much saying everything is required. And then finally I need the image URL, image underscore URL, which is varchar 255. This is just a string, that's why saying that not null. And then created at the image URL is a string to a S3 buckets URL. Timestamp default to current timestamp. Close this out, and my table is created. So now I can exit out of this, clear, and let's go to the var www/html vi, and the file was blog.php. This was it, just cross-checking everything here based on the name, content, image. Okay, everything looks fine. The only thing that I probably want to change here is the database name, since I've created the database blog, blog wq. Okay, that's perfect. So that's kind of creates our entire structure where we have done everything. Now we can probably go ahead and test it. So let's close this, and I'll actually keep it open. I'm going to go back here, and let's go to the S3, EC2 bucket, and our instances, and this is our blog. I am going to open this and open it in a new browser here. It will say it works, but I need that form that I've created, which was blog, not blog, it was home.html, and there you go. I mentioned it's ugly looking form. My first blog post, here is the content, choose file. I have a test image here that I've created. I'm going to use this, and I'll say create post. It says new post created successfully. Perfectly. Now to test it out, I can go to my S3 bucket to see if the image exists. Go to this blog, and I have this test image here. If I look at it, if I download it, it's the same image that I've created. So perfect. So that worked. Next thing is, let's look at the database, if it's in the database. So I'm going to give that command again to open MySQL, which was this one, password AWS training 123, and I'm there, and I'm going to say use blog, that's my database, and I'll say select star from post, that's my table, and I'll see one blog here where that's title, data, and all the stuff here. I can create one more just for the fun of it. Second post, here is the content. I'll choose the same image, no problem. Create post, successfully completed. I can go back to my here, and I'll see two different items here, and probably this is a new image. I mean, same image posted again, but in the same place. So that kind of completes our entire project 4. If you had any issues or any problems following along, or had any issues, Let me know in the comments and I'll get back to you. Thank you.